But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. What if I told you that the very thing you think you need to succeed is actually the biggest obstacle standing between you and your dreams? You see, we live in a world absolutely obsessed with the dramatic moment, the viral video that changes everything overnight, the business that explodes from zero to millions in months, the transformation story that seems to happen in the blink of an eye. Social media feeds us a constant diet of these highlight reels, and somewhere along the way, we've convinced ourselves that this is how real change happens. We've bought into the illusion that success requires some massive, earth-shattering gesture. Has this ever happened to you? You get inspired by someone's incredible story. Maybe it's an entrepreneur who built an empire, or an artist who became famous seemingly overnight, and you think to yourself, I need to do something big too. So you start planning this grand launch, this perfect strategy, this life-changing moment that's going to catapult you from where you are to where you want to be. But then days turn into weeks, weeks turn into months, and you're still planning. Here's what nobody tells you about those overnight success stories. They're not really overnight at all. What you're seeing is the final frame of a movie that's been playing for years, sometimes decades. The real magic, the actual transformation, happened in the quiet moments when no one was watching, when there were no cameras rolling, no applause, no validation. It happened one small decision at a time, one tiny action repeated day after day, building something invisible but unshakable beneath the surface. But we've been conditioned to believe that small actions equal small thinking, haven't we? We've somehow convinced ourselves that unless we're taking massive, impressive steps, we're not really moving forward. So we wait. We wait for the perfect moment, the perfect plan, the perfect level of confidence, the perfect circumstances. We tell ourselves we're being strategic, but what we're really doing is postponing our own momentum. Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to discover might completely change how you think about progress and success. The truth is, most people never start, not because they lack ambition or talent, but because they've been sold a lie about how transformation actually works. They're waiting for lightning to strike, for motivation to hit like a tidal wave, for everything to align perfectly before they take their first step. Meanwhile, there's a small group of people who understand something different. They've discovered that the real power lies not in the grand gesture, but in the gentle beginning. They know that extraordinary achievements don't come from extraordinary moments. They come from ordinary actions done with extraordinary consistency. These people have learned to trust the process, to find meaning in the mundane, to build their dreams one small, deliberate choice at a time. What makes this approach so powerful isn't just that it works. It's that it's accessible to everyone. You don't need special talents, unlimited resources, or perfect circumstances. You don't need to wait for permission, for the right opportunity, or for your fear to disappear. You can start exactly where you are, with exactly what you have, right now. The question isn't whether you're capable of achieving what you want. You absolutely are. The question is whether you're willing to let go of the fantasy of overnight transformation and embrace the reality of daily evolution. Because what I'm about to share with you isn't just another productivity hack or motivational speech. Because what I'm about to share with you isn't just another productivity hack or motivational speech. It's a fundamental shift in how you see what's already available to you right now. You see, there's this hidden truth that successful people rarely talk about, and it has nothing to do with having more resources, more time, or more talent than everyone else. It starts with a simple but revolutionary realization. You already have enough to begin. I know that might sound almost too simple, but bear with me because this mindset shift is the foundation that changes everything. Most of us have been programmed to believe in scarcity, that we need more clarity before we can start, more confidence before we can take action, more perfect circumstances before we can make our move. But what if I told you that clarity, direction, and courage aren't external conditions you have to wait for? What if they're actually internal shifts that happen when you start moving? This is what separates those who build extraordinary lives from those who spend years planning for them. The abundance mindset doesn't mean having everything you want handed to you on a silver platter. It means recognizing that within your current reality, within your present circumstances, there are seeds of transformation waiting to be planted. It's the difference between saying, "I don't have enough time to write," and "I have 10 minutes right now, and that's enough to begin." Here's where it gets really interesting, and this is something that completely transformed my own journey. Whether you want to write that novel that's been living in your head for years, start the business you've been dreaming about, heal your relationship with your body, or simply become more present with the people you love most, none of these transformations will happen all at once. They happen through what I call the invisible architecture of change. Think about it this way. Every person you admire, every success story that inspires you, every transformation that seems miraculous from the outside, they all share this common thread. Behind the scenes, away from the spotlight, there were countless moments of showing up when no one was watching. There were small starts, repeated steps, and invisible work done without any applause or recognition. The novelist didn't wake up one day and write a bestseller. They wrote one sentence, then another, then a paragraph, building their craft one page at a time. The entrepreneur didn't suddenly create $1 million company. They made one phone call, sent one email, had one conversation that led to another. The person who transformed their health didn't do it with one perfect workout or one ideal meal. They made one better choice, then another, creating a pattern that eventually became their new reality. What's fascinating about this process is how it challenges everything our instant gratification culture has taught us about progress. We've been conditioned to expect immediate results, to measure success by speed and visibility. But real transformation operates on a completely different timeline. It's built in the moments between the moments, in the decisions that seem insignificant at the time, but accumulate into something powerful. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic because there's something most people completely miss about why this approach is so effective. And it has everything to do with how our brains actually work, and why forcing dramatic change usually backfires. Write in the comments, "I already have enough to begin," if this resonates with where you are right now. The reason why forcing dramatic change usually backfires is rooted in something much deeper than willpower or motivation. It's actually connected to how our entire culture has shaped our relationship with progress itself. We live in what I call the sprint society. Everywhere you look, there's another crash diet promising you'll lose 30 pounds in 30 days, another productivity hack that claims you'll revolutionize your life in a weekend, another course that guarantees overnight results if you just follow their secret formula. This obsession with speed has created a dangerous illusion that if we're not moving fast, we're somehow falling behind. But here's what nobody tells you about this sprint mentality. It's actually designed to fail. Think about every crash diet you've ever tried or seen someone try. What happens? People lose weight quickly, feel amazing for a few weeks, then gain it all back plus more. Why? Because extreme bursts of effort, no matter how intense, cannot sustain themselves. They burn hot and bright, then inevitably burn out. The same pattern shows up everywhere. People try to completely overhaul their morning routine overnight, commit to working out 2 hours every day when they haven't exercised in months, or attempt to write a book by staying up until 3 in the morning for a week straight. The initial rush feels incredible, but within days or weeks, reality sets in. Life happens, energy depletes, and suddenly they're right back where they started, often feeling worse about themselves than before. What's truly fascinating is how this cultural conditioning has completely distorted our understanding of what breakthrough moments actually are. When we see someone achieve something remarkable, our brains automatically assume there was one pivotal moment, one flash of inspiration, one bold decision that changed everything. We look at the successful entrepreneur and think they must have had that one brilliant idea that launched their empire. We see the athlete on the podium and imagine there was one training session that made all the difference. But this is where the real revelation happens, and it's something that completely changed how I approach every goal in my life. Those breakthrough moments we admire so much aren't actually breakthroughs at all. They're breakouts. They're the visible eruption of something that's been building underground for months or years. The entrepreneur didn't succeed because of one brilliant idea. They succeeded because they had hundreds of conversations, made countless adjustments, and refined their approach through continuous iteration. The athlete didn't win because of one perfect training session. They won because they showed up consistently when no one was watching, when they didn't feel like it, when the weather was terrible, and their motivation was nowhere to be found. We only see the final moment, the crescendo, the result, but we completely miss the symphony that came before it. It's like watching someone plant a seed in the ground and then being amazed when a tree appears years later, as if the tree magically materialized overnight. The real magic was happening in the darkness, in the soil, through seasons of growth that were completely invisible to the casual observer. This misunderstanding creates such unnecessary pressure and disappointment in our own journeys. We start something new, give it our all for a few days or weeks, and when we don't see dramatic results, we assume we're doing something wrong. But the truth is, we're probably doing everything right. We're just operating on the wrong timeline. What I'm about to share with you reveals why this patient approach isn't just more sustainable, but actually more powerful than any sprint could ever be. And it has everything to do with how change actually occurs at the neurological level. Write in the comments, breakthrough or breakout, if you're starting to see the difference. At the neurological level, our brains are wired to resist dramatic change because it triggers our survival mechanisms. But here's where something really insidious happens that most people never recognize. The very thing we think motivates us, those big ambitious dreams, actually becomes the biggest obstacle to taking action. This is what I call the paralysis of grand ambitions, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. Here's how it works. You get inspired by a vision of your future self. Maybe you see yourself as a successful entrepreneur, a published author, or someone who's finally in the best shape of their life. That vision feels incredible. It fills you with energy and possibility. But then reality kicks in. You look at the gap between where you are and where you want to be, and it feels enormous. Suddenly, anything less than a massive, life-changing action feels inadequate. So you start planning the perfect launch, the ideal strategy, the comprehensive overhaul that's going to transform everything at once. But here's the trap. While you're busy planning this grand gesture, you're not actually moving. Days turn into weeks, weeks turn into months, and you're still in the planning phase, still waiting for the perfect moment to make your big move. The irony is devastating. Your ambition has become the very thing preventing you from taking action. This is where our culture's obsession with dramatic transformation becomes toxic. We've been conditioned to believe that if we can't take massive action today, it's better to do nothing at all. Small steps feel embarrassing, insufficient, almost insulting to the magnitude of our dreams. But this all-or-nothing thinking is what keeps most people stuck in perpetual preparation mode. There's something else happening here that's even more subtle and dangerous. Behind the scenes, there's often a pride component to big dreams that we rarely acknowledge. There's a certain nobility, a certain ego satisfaction that comes from having grand ambitions. It feels impressive to tell people about your big plans, your bold vision, your revolutionary idea. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Sometimes that feeling of having big dreams becomes a substitute for actually pursuing them. It's easier to fantasize about launching a groundbreaking company than it is to spend 20 minutes tonight outlining your first product idea. It's more comfortable to dream about writing a best-selling novel than it is to sit down and write one imperfect paragraph. The fantasy gives you an immediate dopamine hit, that rush of imagining success, while the small action requires you to face the messy, uncertain reality of actually building something. If this kind of thoughtful, depth-focused content speaks to you, I'd genuinely love to have you as part of this community. Hit that subscribe button and join others who value substance over quick fixes. This is what I mean when I say that ambition without execution is just performance. We perform the role of someone with big dreams. We talk about our grand plans. We collect inspiration and motivation like trophies, but we never actually bridge the gap between dreaming and doing. The performance becomes so satisfying that we mistake it for progress. What's particularly insidious about this pattern is how it disguises itself as strategic thinking. We tell ourselves we're being thorough, preparing properly, waiting for the right moment. But deep down, there's often a fear hiding behind all that preparation. Fear of starting imperfectly, fear of being judged, fear of discovering that the work is harder than the dream. Now, I want to explore something that completely revolutionizes how you can break free from this cycle. And it starts with understanding why the smallest possible action is actually the most courageous choice you can make. Write in the comments, small action over big dreams, if you're ready to shift from planning to doing. The smallest possible action is actually the most courageous choice you can make, because it requires you to completely abandon the ego satisfaction of grand gestures and embrace something far more powerful, the philosophy of seeds versus sprints. This shift in thinking changes everything about how transformation actually works. Think about how nature operates for a moment. When you plant a seed, you don't expect to see a tree the next morning. You understand that growth happens through a completely different process. Deliberate, patient repetition of simple actions. The seed needs consistent watering, regular sunlight, protection from harsh conditions, day after day, week after week, before anything meaningful breaks the surface. But here's what's fascinating. During those early weeks when nothing visible is happening, the most crucial work is taking place underground. The root system is forming. The foundation is being established. The strength that will eventually support everything above ground is being built in darkness. This is exactly how lasting change works in our lives, but we've forgotten this fundamental truth. We've been seduced by the sprint mentality, convinced that transformation should happen quickly and dramatically. But sustainable change operates on nature's timeline, not our impatient expectations. It demands the same patient consistency that a gardener brings to their work, showing up daily, doing the small necessary things, trusting the process even when results aren't immediately visible. What makes this approach so powerful is something most people completely miss: the compound effect. This is a quiet force that works silently in the background, building momentum through repetition rather than intensity. The person who saves $50 every month doesn't look impressive compared to someone making grand financial gestures, but give them 5 years and they'll have built something substantial. The person who exercises for 25 minutes daily seems modest next to someone doing extreme workout challenges, but their consistency creates lasting fitness that survives life's ups and downs. The person who reads 12 pages every night might seem unremarkable compared to someone who occasionally devours entire books in weekend binges, but they'll finish 50 books a year while building a sustainable learning habit. These people often get underestimated because their approach doesn't generate headlines or social media buzz. Their results take time to surface. Their progress happens gradually. Their transformation occurs below the radar. But here's the hidden truth about compound growth. It starts slowly, almost invisibly, but then accelerates in ways that surprise everyone, including the person doing the work. There's a tipping point where all those small, consistent actions suddenly become visible, where the underground work finally breaks the surface, where the cumulative effect becomes undeniable. This is what people mistake for overnight success. They see the emergence, but they missed the months or years of quiet cultivation that made it possible. The beauty of this approach lies not just in its effectiveness, but in its accessibility. You don't need perfect conditions, unlimited resources, or extraordinary circumstances to plant seeds. You can start exactly where you are, with exactly what you have. The compound effect doesn't discriminate. It works for anyone willing to embrace the patience and consistency it requires. Now, I want to reveal something that goes even deeper than just understanding this concept. It's about how this approach actually rewires your relationship with yourself and creates a foundation of trust that transforms every area of your life. Write in the comments, "I choose seeds over sprints," if you're ready to embrace this patient approach to growth. This approach actually rewires your relationship with yourself because it addresses something most people never consider: the difference between intensity and structure, and why one creates lasting change while the other inevitably collapses. There's a reason why gyms are packed in January and empty by March, Why so many ambitious resolutions crumble within weeks. Why people can be incredibly motivated one day and completely defeated the next. If something in this video shifted your perspective or gave you that quiet, yes, this is it feeling, a like helps me know this approach matters to people like you. The pattern is always the same. Someone decides they're going to transform their life, so they design what I call a sprint lifestyle. They're going to wake up at 5 in the morning, meditate for 30 minutes, work out for an hour, eat perfectly, read for an hour, write in their journal, and completely overhaul their evening routine, all starting Monday. For the first few days, maybe even a week or two, they maintain this intense schedule through sheer willpower and motivation. But here's what they don't account for. Life happens. Their child gets sick and they're up all night. Work demands extra hours for an urgent project. They get invited to dinner with friends. Their car breaks down and throws off their entire morning routine. Suddenly, their perfect system collapses because it was built on intensity, without structure, motivation without sustainability. Intensity without structure is incredibly fragile. It's like building a house of cards, impressive when it's standing, but one unexpected breeze and everything falls apart. The moment unpredictability enters the picture, which it always does, the entire system breaks down. And because they designed their change around an all-or-nothing approach, missing one piece feels like total failure. But something magical happens when you embrace the patient approach of small, consistent actions. You're not trying to change everything at once, so when life throws you a curveball, you can adapt without abandoning your entire progress. You've built flexibility into your system because you understand that sustainability trumps intensity every time. More importantly, something profound shifts in how you see yourself. This is where the real transformation happens, and it's something that goes far beyond just completing tasks or reaching goals. When you act consistently, even in small ways, you begin to see yourself differently. You stop identifying as someone who's trying to become something and start identifying as someone who already is that thing. The person who writes for 15 minutes every day doesn't say, "I'm trying to write a book," for very long. After a few weeks of consistent action, they naturally start saying, "I'm a writer." The person who takes a 20-minute walk every morning doesn't think of themselves as someone attempting to get healthy. They become someone who prioritizes movement. This identity shift is crucial because it creates a reinforcing loop that makes consistency easier, not harder. Here's why. This matters so much. When your actions align with your identity, you stop having to convince yourself to do them. Writers write because that's what writers do. Athletes train because that's what athletes do. The behavior becomes an expression of who you are, not a constant battle against who you think you aren't. The habit reinforces the identity, and the identity reinforces the habit. It becomes an upward spiral, instead of the exhausting cycle of motivation and burnout that most people experience. You're no longer forcing yourself to act like someone you want to become. You're simply being who you already are. Now, I want to show you exactly how this identity transformation works in practice and why it's the missing piece that makes small actions incredibly powerful. Write in the comments, "I am becoming," if you're ready to step into this new identity. How this identity transformation works in practice is deeply connected to something that operates beneath the surface of every decision you make, your fundamental belief about what's available to you. Most people don't realize they're trapped in what I call the scarcity mindset, and this invisible trap is what makes small actions feel pointless before you even begin. Scarcity whispers constantly in the background of your thoughts. It says there's never enough time to make a real difference. Never enough money to start that project. Never enough energy to sustain meaningful change. Never enough support from the people around you. Never enough clarity about what steps to take. Never enough skill to make it worthwhile. It creates this pervasive feeling that everything valuable is limited, that you have to fight for your share, that if someone else is succeeding, there's somehow less left for you. When you're operating from this scarcity lens, small daily actions feel almost insulting to the magnitude of what you think you need. You look at your 10 minutes of writing and think, "What's the point? This won't make a dent in finishing a book." You consider your short walk and dismiss it because it's not enough to transform your health overnight. You think about saving $20 and scoff because it won't solve your financial situation immediately. This channel is built for people who understand that real change happens quietly, consistently, one day at a time. If that's you, subscribing means you'll never miss these conversations about building a meaningful life. Scarcity magnifies every gap and blinds you to every gain. It's not just a thought pattern, it's a filter that distorts reality. Even when things are improving, scarcity finds a way to convince you it's not fast enough, not good enough, not real enough. This mindset doesn't just make you feel bad, it actively sabotages your progress by convincing you that starting small is the same as thinking small. But there's another way to see the world, and once you make this shift, everything changes. Abundance. Thinking doesn't mean living in fantasy or pretending you have unlimited resources. It means recognizing that within your current reality, within your present circumstances, there's enough to begin, enough to grow, enough to take the next meaningful step. This shift changes everything about how you approach your goals and dreams. Instead of waiting for perfect conditions, the ideal amount of time, the perfect level of energy, complete clarity about your path, abundance thinking helps you recognize that you already have something valuable to work with. You already have 10 minutes. You already have that initial idea. You already have the lesson from yesterday's attempt. And from that starting point, something meaningful can be built. The abundance mindset says, the point isn't to do everything perfectly right now. The point is that every action plants a seed. It believes in unseen growth, trusts the process not because it guarantees a specific outcome, but because it understands that momentum comes from consistency, not from intensity. What's remarkable about this shift is how it affects your emotional resilience. When you operate from abundance, you stop needing every day to prove something dramatic. You allow yourself to make mistakes without shame, to rest without guilt, to progress at a human pace rather than demanding superhuman results. Now, I want to explore how this abundance mindset creates a completely different relationship with the resistance and obstacles that inevitably show up on any meaningful journey. Write in the comments, there is enough to begin, if this mindset shift resonates with you. How this abundance mindset creates a completely different relationship with resistance and obstacles reveals something most people get backwards about change. When faced with challenges or setbacks, most people immediately assume they need a better strategy, a more efficient system, a different approach. They dive into research mode, collecting productivity apps, following new methodologies, tweaking their plans endlessly. But here's what they're missing. Failure to follow through rarely comes from having the wrong strategy. It comes from something much deeper, a misalignment between who you think you are and what you're trying to do. This is the hidden truth that separates those who create lasting change from those who cycle through endless attempts. Strategy matters, absolutely, but identity drives behavior. Your self-perception is the invisible force that either supports your efforts or quietly sabotages them. If you fundamentally believe you're a disorganized person, no productivity app in the world will keep you focused long-term. If you see yourself as someone who's inconsistent, even when you successfully follow a plan for a week or two, part of you will be waiting for the inevitable moment when it all falls apart. The resistance you feel isn't usually about the difficulty of the action itself. It's about the internal conflict between what you're trying to do and who you believe yourself to be. When your actions don't match your identity, everything feels forced, temporary, like you're wearing a costume that doesn't quite fit. You might push through for a while with sheer willpower, but eventually your old identity reasserts itself and pulls you back to familiar patterns. This is why so many people experience self-sabotage just when they start making real progress. Deep down, success feels alien, because it doesn't align with their story about themselves. They've been telling themselves they're not the kind of person who follows through, who stays disciplined, who achieves their goals. So when evidence starts accumulating that contradicts this story, their subconscious finds ways to return to what feels familiar, even if what feels familiar is exactly what they're trying to change. But here's where the abundance mindset creates a completely different dynamic. Instead of waiting until you've earned a new identity through results, you start by choosing to believe in a new version of yourself. You don't wait until you've published a book to call yourself a writer. You become a writer the moment you start writing consistently. You don't wait until you've lost weight to identify as someone who prioritizes health. You step into that identity the moment you start making choices that honor your body. This isn't about fake it till you make it thinking or delusional positive thinking. It's about recognizing that identity is not a reward you receive after success. It's a starting point you choose before evidence shows up. Every small, consistent action becomes a vote for this new identity. Every time you show up, you're proving to yourself that you are indeed the kind of person who keeps commitments, who values growth, who follows through. The beautiful thing about this approach is how it transforms your relationship with obstacles and setbacks. Instead of seeing them as evidence that you're not cut out for this, you see them as temporary challenges that the kind of person you're becoming knows how to navigate. Now, I want to share with you the most practical aspect of this entire philosophy: how to choose that one small action that becomes the foundation for everything else. Write in the comments, "I choose my identity," if you're ready to step into who you're becoming rather than waiting for permission. How to choose that one small action that becomes the foundation for everything else starts with understanding that real lasting change happens when you shift identity first, then let your actions flow from that new sense of self. This is where most people get the sequence backwards. They think they need to achieve something significant before they can claim a new identity, but the truth is exactly the opposite. Hitting like on this video is your way of saying more of this please, and it helps me understand that you value this deeper approach to growth and consistency. A writer isn't someone who has published a best-selling novel. A writer is someone who writes. An athlete isn't someone who wins competitions. An athlete is someone who trains consistently. A leader isn't someone with a title. A leader is someone who takes responsibility and serves others. You don't wait to earn these identities through external validation. You embody them through your daily choices and behaviors. This shift changes everything about how you approach your goals because it removes the pressure to prove yourself and replaces it with the simple task of being yourself. When you decide, "I am a writer," the question is no longer, "Am I good enough to write?" but rather, "What would a writer do today?" The answer is obvious. A writer writes. It doesn't matter if it's brilliant or terrible, if anyone will read it, or if it leads anywhere significant. Writers write because that's what writers do. But here's where modern life creates a massive obstacle to this simple truth. We live in a world that constantly pressures us to do more, be more, achieve more simultaneously. We're bombarded with messages that equate productivity with worth, that mistake busyness for progress, that make us feel like we're failing if we're not juggling 10 different improvement projects at once. This creates what I call the overwhelm trap. You decide you want to transform your life, so you try to become a writer, and an athlete, and a better parent, and a more organized person, and someone who meditates and eats perfectly and learns new skills, all at the same time. Within a few days, you're exhausted, scattered, and convinced that change is too hard, when really, you've just tried to change too much at once. The alternative that changes everything is deceptively simple. Choose just one thing each day that truly matters, and do it with complete clarity, commitment, and presence. Not 10 things, not 5, not even 3. One deliberate action that moves you toward the person you're becoming. This single focus becomes your anchor in the chaos of daily life. Yes, you'll still have emails to answer, meals to prepare, responsibilities to handle, but amidst all the noise of obligation, there's one thing that belongs entirely to your growth. One action that builds your future, instead of just managing your present. The power of this approach isn't just practical, it's psychological. When you end the day having completed your one meaningful action, you create a sense of closure and accomplishment that's often missing in our reactive, always-on culture. Even if everything else felt scattered, even if unexpected demands consumed most of your time, you still honored what mattered most. Now, I want to explore something that most people struggle with when they try to implement this approach: how to maintain this consistency when motivation inevitably fades and life gets complicated. Write in the comments, "One thing matters," if you're ready to. Simplify your approach and focus on what truly counts. How to maintain this consistency when motivation inevitably fades and life gets complicated is where the real transformation happens, because this is where you discover the hidden power of choosing quality over quantity. Most people approach change like they're trying to fill a bucket. They think more actions, more habits, more intensity will get them to their destination faster. But what actually happens is they create so much internal noise that they can't hear their own progress. When you choose one thing daily, something profound shifts in your entire approach to growth. You remove the crushing pressure to do everything perfectly and replace it with the focused power to do what truly counts. This isn't about limiting your potential, it's about channeling your energy so precisely that every action carries weight. You move from scattered motion to steady progress, from hoping for results to trusting that consistency creates them. There's something almost magical about this focused approach that most people don't expect. When you're not diluting your attention across multiple goals, when you're not constantly switching between different priorities, your brain can actually concentrate on doing one thing well. The quality of your attention improves, the depth of your engagement increases, and paradoxically, you often make faster progress with less effort than when you were trying to juggle everything at once. But the real revelation comes in how this approach affects your emotional relationship with your own growth. When you end the day having completed your one meaningful action, you create something that's become rare in our always-on culture, a sense of closure and grounded accomplishment. This isn't the frantic satisfaction of checking items off an endless to-do list. This is the deep contentment that comes from knowing you honored what mattered most. Even if the rest of your day was consumed by unexpected demands, even if distractions won most of the battles for your attention, even if you felt reactive and scattered for hours, you still did the one thing that builds your future. That creates a different kind of confidence. Not the brittle confidence that depends on perfect conditions, but the sturdy confidence that comes from proving to yourself, day after day, that you follow through on what matters. This builds something invaluable that most people never develop: genuine self-trust. Every time you complete your one thing, especially on the days when you don't feel like it, you send a message to your subconscious that you are someone who keeps promises to yourself. Over time, this self-trust becomes the foundation for bigger risks, deeper commitments, and more ambitious goals. What's particularly powerful about this approach is how it handles the inevitable resistance that shows up in any meaningful journey. When you only have to focus on one action, resistance feels manageable rather than overwhelming. Now, I want to address the biggest obstacle that derails most people's progress: the moment when motivation disappears, and you have to rely on something much more reliable than feelings to keep moving forward. Write in the comments, "I trust my consistency," if you're ready to build this foundation of self-trust through daily action. The moment when motivation disappears, and you have to rely on something much more reliable than feelings, reveals the fundamental flaw in how most people approach lasting change. We've been conditioned to believe that motivation is the key to achievement, that if we could just stay inspired enough, excited enough, passionate enough, we'd finally follow through on our goals. But motivation is one of the most unreliable forces you could possibly base your progress on. Motivation is fragile, emotional, unstable, and completely unpredictable. It comes and goes like weather. One day you feel unstoppable, ready to conquer the world, and the next day you can barely get out of bed. Relying on motivation to drive your actions is like trying to sail a boat using only the wind. When the wind is strong and blowing in your direction, you feel incredible, making rapid progress toward your destination. But the moment it shifts or disappears entirely, you're left drifting, helpless, wondering why you ever thought this journey was possible. This is why so many people experience that frustrating cycle of starting strong and then completely losing momentum. They mistake the initial rush of enthusiasm for sustainable fuel, building their entire approach around maintaining that emotional high. But emotions are designed to fluctuate. That's their nature. Expecting to feel motivated every day is like expecting the weather to be perfect every day. It's not realistic, and it's not necessary. What successful people understand, what separates those who create lasting change from those who cycle through endless attempts, is that consistency doesn't depend on how you feel. It depends on what you've decided. It's about showing up when inspiration is absent, when your mood is low, when results are invisible, when every part of you wants to do something else. It's about honoring your commitment to your future self, even when your present self doesn't feel like it. This shift from motivation-driven action to decision-driven consistency changes everything about your relationship with progress. You stop waiting for the perfect emotional state to take action. You stop treating your growth like something that needs to be constantly recharged. Instead, you create structure that carries you forward regardless of your mood, regardless of your energy level, regardless of whether today feels easy or difficult. The people who build extraordinary lives aren't the most motivated. They're the most consistent. They don't rely on emotional highs to fuel their progress. They've learned to create systems that work even when they don't feel like working. They've discovered that discipline isn't about forcing yourself to do things you hate. It's about creating such clear structure around what matters, that following through becomes the path of least resistance. This is where the real mastery lies, in building systems that support your consistency rather than depending on your willpower to overcome poor systems. When your environment, your schedule, and your habits all align to make the right choice easier than the wrong choice, you stop fighting yourself every day. Now, I want to show you exactly how to create this kind of supportive structure and why most people's approach to building habits actually works against them rather than for them. Write in the comments, consistency over feelings, if you're ready to stop depending on motivation and start building reliable systems. How to create this kind of supportive structure reveals something most people never recognize about their own internal dialogue. Even when you start building these reliable systems, even when you begin choosing consistency over motivation, there's still one more obstacle that can completely derail your progress. It's subtle, persistent, and incredibly dangerous because it sounds so reasonable. There's this voice that whispers after every small action you take, and it's gotten very good at undermining progress through slow erosion rather than dramatic sabotage. You finish your 10-minute writing session, and it whispers, "That's not enough." You complete your short walk, and it suggests, "This won't make a real difference." You choose the healthier meal, and it dismisses your effort with, "This isn't going to change anything significant." This voice is insidious because it doesn't scream at you to stop completely. It doesn't try to convince you that your goals are impossible. Instead, it plants doubt about the value of your effort, suggesting that unless your action is big, dramatic, and instantly transformative, it isn't really worth much. Over time, this constant erosion of confidence in your small actions can be more damaging than any major setback. The reason this voice is so convincing is because we've been culturally conditioned to measure progress by dramatic milestones and visible outcomes. We expect transformation to announce itself loudly, to be obvious to everyone around us, to create immediate and measurable change. When our daily actions don't produce these dramatic results, we begin to question whether we're doing enough, whether we're on the right path, whether our efforts are actually working. But here's what that voice doesn't understand about how real change actually works. Progress isn't always visible results that you can point to and celebrate. Progress is showing up when you don't feel like it. Progress is making a different choice than you made last week, last month, last year. Progress is creating new defaults in your thinking, your habits, your responses to challenges, one small decision at a time. When you focus only on outcomes, the pounds lost, the words written, the money saved, you miss the most important transformation that's happening in your process. You miss how you're building trust with yourself, how you're developing resilience, how you're becoming someone who follows through. These internal shifts don't show up on scales or spreadsheets, but they're the foundation that will eventually support every external result you want to achieve. The real progress is in how you carry yourself differently after a month of small, consistent actions. It's in how you respond to setbacks with curiosity instead of catastrophe. It's in how you wake up with a sense of direction rather than drifting through your days. These changes are profound, but they're often invisible to others, and sometimes even to yourself, until you look back and realize how far you've actually come. Now, I want to explore something that completely changed my understanding of sustainable growth, why the quietest periods of your journey are often the most important, and what's really happening during those times when it feels like nothing is moving. Write in the comments, progress is invisible, if you're starting to see how much you've already grown in ways that don't show up on the surface. Why the quietest periods of your journey are often the most important connects to something that completely transformed my understanding of sustainable growth. There's this peculiar silence that accompanies the early stages of any meaningful pursuit, and most people misinterpret this silence as a sign that nothing significant is happening. You begin something new, a creative project, a health transformation, a business idea, and almost no one notices. The world doesn't applaud your effort. No one celebrates your small steps. You show up day after day, and still it feels like you're moving through your journey in complete invisibility. This quiet season is simultaneously the greatest gift and the most challenging test you'll face in any transformation. It's a gift because it offers something incredibly rare in our hyper-connected, always performing world: complete freedom to grow without the pressure of an audience. You're not yet weighed down by expectations. You're not being measured against others. You're not having to justify your pace or defend your approach. There's no external validation, but there's also no external judgment. But it's also a test because your ego will desperately crave attention, recognition, some sign that your effort is being noticed and valued. When that validation doesn't come, when the silence stretches on for weeks or months, your mind will try to convince you that what you're doing must not matter, that maybe you should pivot to something more visible, something that gets quicker recognition. This is where most people quit, not because they lack commitment, but because they misread the silence. They think it means failure when it actually means they're still in the most crucial stage of development, the root stage. Everything strong that you'll ever build in your life begins in darkness, grows in silence, develops underground before it reaches toward the light. What you can't see during these quiet periods is that you're operating in what I call the laboratory of invisibility. While no one's watching, you're completely free to experiment, to practice without pressure, to make mistakes privately, to be terrible before you become good. This freedom is extraordinary, and most people don't recognize its value until they've lost it. Think about it. Once you become visible, once people are paying attention to your work, every move becomes scrutinized. You start adjusting your natural rhythm to match external expectations. You begin performing rather than exploring. But in the silence, in the invisibility, you can focus entirely on the craft itself, on your own growth, on building the foundation that will eventually support everything that comes after. The laboratory of invisibility is where you develop the habits that will serve you long after momentum arrives. It's where you learn to show up for the work itself, not for the reaction to the work. It's where you build genuine confidence, not the kind that depends on applause, but the kind that comes from knowing you can trust yourself to keep going, even when no one else believes in what you're building. Now, I want to share something that most people never realize about momentum. It's not something that happens to you, it's something you deliberately build, and understanding how this process actually works changes everything about your patience with the journey. Write in the comments, "I embrace the silence," if you're ready to use this invisible season as your greatest advantage. Something that most people never realize about momentum is that it's not some mystical force that randomly shows up to rescue your efforts. Momentum isn't magic, it's not an accident, and it's definitely not something you have to wait around hoping will eventually appear. Momentum is actually a muscle that you build with intention, repetition, and time, and understanding how this process really works changes everything about your patience with the seemingly slow periods of growth. Here's what makes momentum so misunderstood. The first days, sometimes even the first weeks of building any new pattern don't feel like progress at all. They feel like struggle. They feel like pushing a massive boulder up a hill with no sign that it's ever going to get easier. Every single action requires conscious effort. Every decision feels like a negotiation with yourself. Every step forward seems to require more energy than you think you have available. But something incredible is happening beneath the surface during these difficult early days. Momentum builds slowly and invisibly underneath your actions, like roots growing in darkness before any green shoots appear above ground. Each time you show up, each time you follow through despite not feeling like it, each time you choose your long-term vision over your short-term comfort, you're not just completing a task. You're strengthening your momentum muscle. What's fascinating about this process is how it creates profound psychological changes that most people never anticipate. When you've been consistent for a period of time, even if it's just a few weeks, your brain begins to trust you in a completely different way. It starts to believe that you actually follow through on what you say you're going to do. It stops questioning every new goal or habit you want to establish because there's now a track record that suggests you're reliable. This trust between your conscious intentions and your subconscious patterns reduces what I call mental friction, that exhausting internal negotiation that happens every time you need to take action. Instead of waking up and debating whether you're going to do your morning routine, your brain simply expects it. Instead of having to convince yourself to work on your project, it becomes as automatic as brushing your teeth. The mental energy you used to spend on internal arguments about whether to follow through gets redirected toward actually doing the work. You stop overthinking every decision because you've established a pattern of making good decisions. The question shifts from, "Should I do this today?" to, "What time am I doing this?" That seemingly small shift represents a massive psychological transformation. This is why people who have built strong momentum often seem to accomplish things effortlessly, while others struggle with the same basic actions. It's not that they have more willpower or better genetics, they've simply trained their momentum muscle to the point where consistent action feels natural rather than forced. Now, I want to explore what happens when you inevitably face disruptions to this momentum, because how you handle these interruptions determines whether you build lasting change or fall back into old patterns. Write in the comments, "I'm building momentum daily," if you're starting to feel this shift from struggle to flow in your own routine. What happens when you inevitably face disruptions to this momentum reveals why most people's approach to building habits fails them when they need it most. Life has a way of throwing curveballs. Exactly when you're starting to feel confident about your progress. Your child gets sick, work demands extra hours, you travel for a week, or some unexpected crisis requires all your attention. Suddenly, the routine you've been building feels impossible to maintain. This is where most people make a critical mistake. They think that because they can't do their full routine, they should do nothing at all. They treat consistency like an all-or-nothing proposition, so the moment their perfect system gets disrupted, they abandon the entire effort. But there's a completely different approach that changes everything about how you handle these inevitable interruptions. The secret lies in understanding that there's quiet power in how you begin and end your day, and this power doesn't depend on having perfect conditions or unlimited time. Daily rituals aren't just nice-to-have additions to your schedule. They're the anchors that hold you steady when everything else feels chaotic. They create structure that transcends circumstances, reduce decision fatigue when your mental energy is already depleted, and most importantly, they remind you who you're becoming even when external pressures try to pull you back into old patterns. A ritual is different from a habit because it's filled with intention and meaning. It's not just about checking boxes or completing tasks. It's about creating moments throughout your day that reconnect you with your values and your vision. Even if you only have 5 minutes in the morning, even if your evening gets completely derailed, having these anchor points means you never completely lose your connection to the person you're building. But rituals alone aren't enough if you're trying to maintain them in an environment that works against you. This brings us to something most people completely overlook when they're focused on willpower and motivation. No matter how disciplined you are, no matter how strong your commitment feels, you are constantly being shaped by your surroundings in ways you don't even realize. Your environment isn't neutral. It's an active force that's either reinforcing your goals or quietly sabotaging them every single day. The apps on your phone's home screen, the food that's visible in your kitchen, the books on your nightstand, the people you spend time with, even the lighting in your workspace, all of these elements are constantly influencing your choices, making some behaviors easier and others harder. Here's The truth that changes everything about sustainable progress. Every system produces the results it was designed to produce. If you're trying to build new habits in an environment that's optimized for your old patterns, you're fighting an uphill battle every single day. But when you intentionally design your surroundings to support the person you're becoming, suddenly the right choices become easier than the wrong ones. Now, I want to show you exactly how to create this kind of supportive environment and why most people's approach to tracking their progress actually undermines their confidence rather than building it. Write in the comments, "My environment supports my growth," if you're ready to design your surroundings to work with you instead of against you. How to create this kind of supportive environment reveals why most people's approach to tracking their progress actually undermines their confidence rather than building it. Here's what typically happens. Someone starts a new habit or goal, and they immediately begin measuring themselves by traditional standards: pounds lost, income earned, followers gained, major milestones reached. But most meaningful progress begins far too small to register on these conventional metrics. When we fail to track the small wins, when we only pay attention to the big, obvious changes, we lose sight of the distance we've actually traveled. Our brains, which are naturally wired to notice what's missing rather than what's working, convince us that nothing significant is happening. This creates a devastating cycle where the very effort that's building our future gets dismissed as insufficient, leading to discouragement and often abandonment of the path altogether. The solution isn't to lower your standards or celebrate mediocrity. It's to track what actually matters in the building phase. Instead of only measuring outcomes, you need to track your consistency, your choices, your return rate after setbacks. Did you show up today? Did you make a decision aligned with your future self? Did you choose growth over comfort in some small way? These aren't consolation prizes. They're the actual building blocks of transformation. But even with better tracking systems, even with supportive environments and clear rituals, there's still one more element that determines whether your progress survives contact with real life. It's something most people never consider until they're overwhelmed and wondering why their best intentions keep getting derailed. Every decision to move forward, every commitment to growth, every choice to prioritize your development requires something that our culture rarely talks about honestly: trade-offs. Every time you say yes to something meaningful, you are by default saying no to something else. Every hour you spend building your future is an hour you're not spending on immediate pleasure, social media, mindless entertainment, or a dozen other competing demands for your attention. If you don't become deliberate about these boundaries, if you don't consciously choose what deserves your no so that your yes can be protected, your progress will always be under attack, not from dramatic sabotage, but from the constant erosion of small compromises, minor distractions, and well-meaning requests that pull you away from what matters most. This is where most people get stuck in a frustrating cycle. They know what they want to build. They even take action toward it, but they haven't created the protective boundaries that would allow their efforts to accumulate into something substantial. They're trying to say yes to their priorities while also saying yes to everything else, and that mathematical impossibility leaves them feeling scattered, behind, and constantly disappointed with their progress. Now, I want to address the moment that tests every person who commits to this path, when doubt creeps in and whispers that maybe none of this effort really matters, and how to navigate that crucial crossroads without abandoning everything you've built. Write in the comments, "I protect my yes," if you're ready to create boundaries that support your most important commitments. When doubt creeps in and whispers that maybe none of this effort really matters, you're actually arriving at one of the most crucial crossroads of any meaningful journey. This moment reveals something most people don't understand about sustainable growth. Doubt doesn't show up because you're doing something wrong. Doubt appears because you're doing something that matters deeply to you, something that stretches you beyond your comfort zone into territory where the outcome isn't guaranteed. Doubt inevitably appears in every meaningful pursuit, and it rarely arrives with drama or obvious red flags. Instead, it creeps in quietly, almost politely, asking questions that sound completely reasonable. Is this really working? Am I doing enough? Shouldn't I be further along by now? Maybe I'm kidding myself about this whole thing. These aren't necessarily the wrong questions to ask. Doubt isn't wrong, it's actually part of caring deeply about something uncertain. The challenge is that doubt feels so reasonable, so logical, that it's easy to mistake it for wisdom. But there's a crucial difference between healthy evaluation and emotional reaction. When doubt whispers, the temptation is to stop everything, to completely reassess your approach, to look for new strategies or abandon the path altogether. But what you often need in those moments isn't a better plan. You need stronger trust in the process you've already begun. This is where returning to your daily action becomes one of the most powerful choices you can make. When your thoughts are tangled, movement brings clarity. When confidence wavers, discipline brings stability. You don't need to resolve the doubt before continuing. You continue and allow the action to remind you of your own strength. The very act of showing up despite uncertainty builds the kind of resilience that can't be taught, only earned. But here's what's fascinating about this journey. If you navigate through the doubt phase successfully, if you learn to trust the process even when you can't see the results yet, eventually you arrive at a completely different challenge. You start to wonder how to grow what you've built without sacrificing the very rhythm and simplicity that got you there. This scaling question represents a beautiful problem to have. It means your small daily actions have created something substantial, something with momentum, something that's working. But it also presents a delicate balance. How do you expand your impact, your reach, your results, without breaking the integrity of the system that created your success? Scaling isn't about doing more for the sake of more. That's just the sprint mentality in disguise. True scaling is about expanding what already works, without diluting the essence that made it powerful. It's about deepening your commitment rather than scattering your energy. It's about taking the foundation you've built through patient consistency and stretching it thoughtfully, deliberately, sustainably. The key is understanding that you don't abandon the principles that got you here. You apply them at a new level. Now I want to explore what this scaling process actually looks like in practice and why the most successful approach often involves becoming more selective, not less, as your capacity grows. Write in the comments, "I trust my process," if you're learning to navigate doubt without abandoning the path that's working. What this scaling process actually looks like in practice reveals something profound that most people never discover about sustainable growth. As your capacity expands, as your skills develop, as your confidence builds, you begin to realize that small daily actions aren't just techniques for getting things done. They're actually a philosophy, a way of declaring that life isn't a race to be won, but a rhythm to be lived. This realization completely transforms your relationship with progress itself. The small start isn't a phase you graduate from once you become successful enough. It's not a temporary strategy you use until you're ready for the real approach. It becomes the foundation of how you approach everything: new projects, unexpected challenges, evolving dreams. You've learned to trust the power of beginning where you are, with what you have, regardless of how small it might seem. This philosophy creates what I call the infinite path, a way of living that isn't constantly reaching toward some future moment when everything will finally be perfect. Instead of treating your current efforts as stepping stones to a better life someday, you begin to find meaning, satisfaction, and even joy in the process itself. You're not postponing fulfillment until you reach your destination, because you've discovered that the journey is where life actually happens. The infinite path shifts the fundamental questions you ask yourself. Instead of, "How fast can I get there?" you start asking, "How fully can I live here?" Instead of, "What do I need to accomplish to prove my worth?" you begin wondering, "How can I honor what matters most to me today?" This isn't just a mindset shift. It's a complete reorientation of how you measure a life well lived. What's incredibly liberating about this approach is how it removes the constant pressure to arrive somewhere. You're no longer trying to earn your worth through completed tasks, achieved goals, or external validation. You already know you're enough. Your actions become expressions of who you are, rather than desperate attempts to prove who you might become someday. This doesn't mean you stop having goals or ambitions. It means your goals serve your growth, rather than your growth serving your goals. You pursue things because they align with your values, because they stretch you in meaningful ways, because they contribute to something larger than yourself. But your peace, your sense of purpose, your fundamental okayness isn't held hostage by whether you achieve them or not. Living on the infinite path also changes how you impact others. When you're not constantly stressed about your own progress, when you're not competing for scarce resources or validation, when you're operating from a place of internal stability, you naturally become a source of calm and encouragement for the people around you. Your consistency becomes contagious. Your peace becomes magnetic. Your groundedness becomes a gift to your community. Now, I want to explore how this way of living creates a legacy that extends far beyond anything you might accomplish or achieve, and why the quiet influence of daily consistency often matters more than dramatic public success. Write in the comments, "I choose the infinite path," if you're ready to embrace this rhythm over racing, this process over pressure. How this way of living creates a legacy that extends far beyond anything you might accomplish reveals something most people completely miss about influence and impact. The truth is, your path is already affecting others in ways you probably don't even realize. People around you are noticing your presence, your discipline, your peace. They're watching how you handle setbacks, how you prioritize your time, how you respond to stress and uncertainty. You become an example not through perfection, but through consistency. Not by having all the answers, but by showing up even when you don't know what you're doing. Not by being impressive, but by being reliable. There's something deeply magnetic about someone who lives with intention, who honors their commitments to themselves, who chooses growth over comfort on ordinary Tuesday mornings when no one else is paying attention. This influence operates completely differently from the kind of impact our culture typically celebrates. It's not loud. It's not dramatic. It doesn't generate headlines or social media buzz, but it's profound in ways that dramatic gestures rarely are. When someone watches you choose consistency over convenience, discipline over distraction, presence over performance, they begin to believe that maybe they can make different choices too. You might never know about most of these moments of influence. Someone at work notices how you handle pressure with calm focus and starts questioning their own reactive patterns. A family member sees how you protect your morning routine and realizes they too could create space for what matters to them. A friend observes your patience with your own imperfect progress and begins to extend the same grace to themselves. The small daily actions you're building right now, the quiet choices you make when no one's watching, the way you return to your path after setbacks, these are shaping your legacy in real time. Legacy isn't some distant, dramatic future impact that gets carved into stone or remembered in history books. Legacy is who you become through how you live each ordinary day, and how that way of being ripples outward in ways you'll never fully see or measure. This reframes everything about what it means to live a meaningful life. You don't have to build an empire or solve global problems or become famous to create a legacy that matters. You just have to live with integrity, show up consistently, and trust that the way you move through the world leaves invisible, but real impressions on the people whose lives intersect with yours. The parent who models patience and persistence for their children, the colleague who demonstrates that you can be both ambitious and balanced, the friend who shows that it's possible to pursue growth without becoming obsessed with optimization. These are the legacies that actually shape the world, one relationship at a time, one example at a time. Now, I want to share something that ties all of this together. Why this approach to living isn't just about personal transformation, but about contributing to a cultural shift that the world desperately needs right now. Write in the comments, "My daily actions matter," if you're beginning to see how your quiet consistency creates ripples beyond what you can measure. Why this approach to living isn't just about personal transformation, but about contributing to a cultural shift reveals something beautiful about the ripple effect of choosing consistency over intensity, substance over spotlight. When you commit to the path of small starts, when you build your life through patient daily action rather than dramatic gestures, you're not just changing your own trajectory, you're contributing to a completely different way of being that the world desperately needs. The energy you carry when you live this way is palpable. People can feel it when they're around someone who isn't constantly rushing toward the next milestone, who isn't anxious about proving their worth, who has found peace in the process rather than desperation in the pursuit. You become a source of calm in a world that's increasingly frantic, a reminder that there's another way to move through life that's both more sustainable and more satisfying. This vibration, this energy that comes from living with intention rather than urgency, gets passed on in ways you'll never fully realize. You carry it into every room you enter, every conversation you have, every interaction you engage in. People absorb this energy subconsciously, and it plants seeds in them about what's possible. They might not be able to articulate exactly what's different about you, but they sense that you've found something they're looking for. Your job in all of this isn't to prove your worth through impressive productivity or to convince anyone that your approach is right. Your job is simply to live in a way that reflects what you value most, and to let that life become its own message. You don't need to preach about the power of small actions. You just need to embody it. You don't need to lecture about consistency. You just need to demonstrate it through how you show up day after day. The life you're building right now is impacting people who are watching quietly from the sidelines, wondering if they too are allowed to begin. They're observing how you handle ordinary moments with presence, how you protect your priorities without being rigid, how you pursue growth without becoming obsessed. They're seeing that it's possible to be ambitious without being anxious, disciplined without being harsh, committed without being perfect. This is the real cultural shift that's needed. Not more people trying to optimize their way to extraordinary results, but more people choosing to live extraordinarily ordinary lives. More people who understand that the most radical thing you can do in a world obsessed with speed is to slow down. The most rebellious thing you can do in a culture that worships the dramatic is to find profound meaning in the mundane. Now, I want to bring this full circle and show you exactly how to take everything we've explored and translate it into your own starting point, no matter where you are right now. Write in the comments, "I am the message," if you're ready to let your life speak louder than your words through the consistency of your daily choices. How to take everything we've explored and translate it into your own starting point brings us right back to where we began, with the understanding that the most powerful thing you can do is simply start where you are, with what you have right now. If you've made it this far, if you've stayed with me through this entire exploration of small starts and daily action, that tells me something important about you. You're not looking for another quick fix or magic formula. You're ready to embrace the patient path, the one that builds something real and lasting through consistency rather than intensity. The fact that you're here means you understand that transformation doesn't happen in highlight reels. It happens in the quiet moments when you choose growth over comfort, action over analysis, presence over performance. And if this resonates with you, if this approach feels like something you want to explore deeper, I'd love for you to subscribe to this channel, because this is exactly the kind of content I create. Real, practical insights about building a meaningful life through intentional daily choices, not through dramatic overhauls or impossible standards. If you're someone who made it all the way to the end, if this message landed with you in a way that feels significant, leave a comment that simply says, "This message was meant for me." I read every comment, and I'd love to know that this connected with you in some meaningful way. And if this video created something valuable for you, if it shifted how you think about progress, or gave you permission to start small, hitting that like button lets me know that this approach resonates with people like you. It helps me understand what matters most to the kind of person who values depth over noise, consistency over hype. There's a video right here that dives even deeper into how to design your environment to support these small daily actions, the practical steps that make consistency easier than resistance. Click and continue with me over there, because the journey we just started together is really just beginning.